Hi, everyone. Welcome to Foresight's Biotech and Health Extension Group. I'm really excited today to welcome Aaron King, who's been a very dear long-term collaborator. And a few years ago, we came up with this notion that, man, if only we had some kind of like easily accessible map/tech tree that would allow people that are entering the longevity industry anew to figure out like where they could best plug in to make progress, either whether it's talent, funders, whatever you might have. And so we went on this quest to first build a tool that would allow one to build tech trees. And then eventually Coordination Network came along and helped us with a fantastic AI-enabled tech tree tool. And so I'm happy to have Aaron here today to show you a little bit like what we've been up to lately. It's like an ongoing project. And so it's not really ever going to be finished, I think, because hopefully the space is growing and evolving. But we're doing our best to keep track of it. Thank you so much, Aaron, for all of your fantastic work that you put into it. And without further ado, the stage is yours.
All right, so I'm just going to share this. And okay, so yeah, this is a project that's been going on for a few years. Right now, it's in a. I'll go over the underlying philosophy. So this is a diagram that I saw at a recent conference I was at for a longevity biotech fellowship. And the idea is that here we are in the present. We're trying to find our way to the future. It's not necessarily a straight line. There's this big sort of branched network of advances and space that science could go into, all these different directions. And we want to go in a very particular direction. So the advertised reality that a lot of scientists or companies or other kind of institutions will portray to people is just, we're going to just do the thing and then we'll get there. But the actual reality is a lot different. You have to go from one advance to the next and find your way amongst this sort of winding path to get to the future. This is a diagram, by the way, that I saw from John Schlorn. I can't pronounce his last name, but it was John who's currently working on some advanced biotech in the head transplant space, which is very interesting. So anyway, the first objective is we want to get scientists to break down their big ideas into manageable components. Yeah, sure, we know where you want to go, and it's very clear like what the end product is, but what are all the steps to get there? And so if they can break that down, I think it becomes a lot more likely for them to succeed. Sorry. The second objective is to develop support by finding tangential value. Sorry. The green lines here represent like side pieces, advancements that come off of the nodes that we're finding to get to the future that we want to see. Things that are not necessarily going to get us to that future, but that other people are going to be interested in. And what these are essentially support structures for the thing that we want to do. So for instance, looking at this tree of information, of advancements here, cryonic organ preservation leads to preserved bodies, which might lead to whole body replacement. This is something that a certain number of people are interested in, but the people who are interested in whole body replacement are a very small population. There's a lot more people interested in cryonic organ preservation. So if you get up to cryonic organ preservation, there's like this giant, like 3 groups of people who are interested in that. And then once you get to cryonically preserved body, there's going to be less people. And then whole body replacement is even less people. But that's okay, because what we're after here is to find out, hey, look, you don't need the whole body replacement population to carry this entire chain, because a large portion of it will be, people who are only interested in that first step. And if you can break it down, you can find out, hey, look, we're trying to do this weird thing where we replace pieces of the brain to try to keep your brain young forever. Oh, but actually, one of the things we need is optogenetic silencing. And with optogenetic silencing, you can actually potentially cure epilepsy. Now you've got epilepsy people fighting for your cause, at least up to the point of that particular node. And then maybe they drop off after that, but that's okay, because now a smaller population needs to carry a smaller portion of the journey. So I'm not sure if I've been explaining it correctly this whole time. I just explained it better in that conference, and it seemed like people finally understood the point of this. So hopefully we'll go over and see how everyone's reaction to this has been. I want to end here with issues with the tech tree. So from what I've seen so far, there's three key reasons why people don't want to share detailed plans or create detailed plans for what it is that they're doing. One is that they know that their plans are actually faulty and they don't want other people to know. And then two is that people think others will steal their ideas if they make too detailed of a plan. And then three is it's a lot of effort to map out your ideas in this granular fashion. So it's been difficult. I'm not sure to what degree all these are at play, but the original plan was, hey, we'll make this tech tree and we'll make a sort of like a high level view of it. And then everybody who's working in their field should be the ones coming up with the plans for their individual pieces. We'll put it in, we'll see how they all interplay with each other, how they whether like a whole bunch of people need one particular advancement, such as delivery of gene editing. That is a bottleneck for a whole lot of different ideas. Other bottlenecks might not be as relevant for stymieing progress. But we'll map it all out and we'll see where everyone lies on it. And then we'll see what's the best thing to put effort into in order to produce the maximum amount of progress. Again, so these are the three things that are in the way of developing this tech tree. And I think that's it. What I wanted to do was take most of the time and get feedback on what you guys think about the nature of the tech tree at this point and how useful you think it is.
Thank you so much, Aaron. I love the philosophical bit. I'm also a sucker for the philosophy aspect of things. Okay, I don't know if folks here have seen the tech tree. Like anyone who's seen the tech tree, raise your hand.
Seen recently or seen ever?
We can go over it. We can go over it right now, actually.
I think it wouldn't be a bad, because I don't think everyone has been swiftly following along in the development journey.
Makes sense. So this is the current iteration. This was built by Lateral.io. The tooling is a lot better than it was before, and it's improved massively. Basically, there's all these nodes. Color-coded orange nodes are challenges that prevent things from happening. Black nodes are technology, just general technology nodes. The blue are tangential pieces of value. And the green are the longevity goals, the sort of the end product, which at the end of it is radical life extension. We can click on any of them and we can get a sort of a overview description with a bunch of links for different organizations that are involved. And and the idea is that you'll be able to see what is actually stopping progress from occurring. I know that there's a lot of roadmaps, there's a lot of plans and stuff out there in various stages. It's not scientifically granular enough. They're still good. I like them a lot. LBS roadmap is good. There's a bunch of roadmaps that are pretty good. They're good. They give good information, but if you want to know, what's actually stopping cryo progress? You might say something like more money, more people, more time and effort, but really it's about, right now, it's cryoprotectant toxicity is basically universally agreed upon amongst the entire cryo space. Hey, we can't figure out cryo toxicity, so that's stopping everything else. Which means that whenever and here's the note for that, whenever you hear information about the space, what you should be looking for is, have they figured out the cryoprotectant toxicity or figured out a way around it? If they're talking about how they've improved the economics of storing people in cold storage, or they've talked about improved, cost for the space or something like that, that's not what's stopping progress, right? It's one particular problem at the moment that seems to be universally agreed upon. And this is coming from my experience my family's business was biodiesel. And there's a big push for algae biodiesel at one point. And we were in the space for a pretty long time. We had to understand what the actual problem, what was stopping this from happening. Because if it did happen, we'd have to change our whole business model. So we had to be very aware of, okay, at what stage is the algae oil at? And what we discovered was that there was a very specific problem about energy extraction, so that it took more energy to extract the oil than you got from actually getting the oil and then using it for fuel. And that wasn't being solved by anybody. And there was a whole galaxy of companies and efforts that were trying to solve all these other pieces. And then they would get to that part and they would fail, which across the board, just completely. And understanding for all these different orange nodes, understanding what specifically is stopping progress in any one of these particular fields. It's not just money. It's not just effort. It's not just like tooling in general. It's very specific things that can't be solved. And once those things are solved, now you're off to the races. Now you can start to think, oh, something's going to happen here. So the idea was, hey, let's have a laundry list of all those things. We'll put them on this board. And then maybe crowd-protected toxicity also solves some other technology. I don't have the detailed information to find out, but people in the space might have heard, oh, if we solve this part, then we'll also get this other thing. And that was the idea behind this tech tree, was finding out how all these technologies are interlinked to each other, which ones are just like really big nexus points of focus versus ones that are just one-off. Oh, you can solve this and then one cool thing will happen, or you solve this thing and 50 cool things will happen. So it's here, and right now it's in an alpha state, but hopefully we're releasing it soon. And yeah, I guess anything else that we should cover, or?
The AI functionality, perhaps?
Yes. Okay, sure. So we've got an LLM that allows you to interact with this. So you can just ask it questions like, tell me about bionic progress. And it'll generate answers for you. The more information that we get, the more detailed or more useful the answers are going to be. As well as there's a really cool, okay, I don't like talking about this part of it because it's early in the process, but Lateral also has this idea, and they find it interesting as well. This whole thing is essentially, you can imagine all these nodes as like Lego pieces or like molecules with sticky ends. And what you could do is you could get enough metadata on all these pieces, or you break them down into even further tiny pieces. You can have the LLM or the AI automatically generate an entirely different tree. And the idea, this is a sort of a future concept. The idea would be, it's like a box of Legos. You shake up the whole thing and you're trying to find out if you can find connections between these technologies that people haven't discovered yet. That's definitely on like out there, but it's just very easy to imagine that you could be able to just shake it up and see if there's some connection between cellular reprogramming and removing arterial plaques or something like that. I don't know. Things that AI might pick up that we can't. But for now, there's an LLM. It allows you to interact with the tree and answer questions for you and ask probing questions. Okay, does that cover the AI portion? Okay.
Yeah, I think so. If anyone has questions or comments, feel free to raise your hand. Otherwise, we can, for example, if you want to know. Oh, Micah has a question. Okay, you go.
Yeah, I'm curious how. So this map does a good job of mapping out specific and clear paths towards clear goals. Do we have any way to integrate things that are much more fuzzy, like exploratory research, or like a simple example here is figuring out what causes aging, or what is aging, right? Like there's disagreement. You got 10 different theories of aging out there. I don't know how that would fit onto the roadmap, or does it just not make sense in this tech tree? Or is there a way to somehow capture these kind of more fuzzy things that are just kind of getting a better understanding of how the world works, but we don't know what that will lead to?
So that kind of stuff is perfect for the system, because we can just put it on here. You find out a particular theory of aging, for instance, mitochondrial theory, and that will tie into mitochondrial pathways for regeneration. If you think, okay, we're going to try to do replacement or regeneration of mitochondria, those are technologies. One of the precursors for all these things is finding out like why it happens in the first place. So that would just be another node prior to whatever the relevant like intervention would be. And I think it's very relevant. And I think that everybody should know the philosophies of, okay, this is why I believe aging happened, and here's what that would imply, versus some other theory of aging. How many nodes does that connect to? And that would inform, to be honest, I feel like it'd be really obvious which theories are more likely to be true if you've got one that seems to be connected to everything, and then couple that are just off on their own, right?
Your answer made me realize the actual question I wanted to ask and failed to
Sure.
ask, which is how do we put things on, or can we put things on here where you don't know what answering a question will lead to, but it's an
Yeah.
interesting question. So you see something weird in the world that doesn't make
Yeah.
sense. And an example that's been used in the past is, I forget what it was, is someone wondered why a particular rock glowed purple instead of red when superheated. And no one knew why. And it led to the discovery of radioactivity and nuclear fission or fusion or whatever it is and all this stuff. But it was just someone's curiosity, and maybe it doesn't make sense on a chart like that.
Well, here's
or
the
like
thing.
this,
It's just,
or what does it?
it can be a node that just doesn't lead to anything yet.
I see.
Not every node needs to lead somewhere. It could just be on its own, and then it just hangs out until somebody notices it and they're like, oh, you know what? This actually is relevant to this other thing over here. That would be where the tree actually provides value. By just listing random concepts, yeah, it's great and all, but that's not the value of this project. The value of this project is to allow people to try to make connections between those random concepts and some sort of value producing goal and that's totally fine to have nodes just hanging out and with nothing coming out the back end of them. It's just, hey, here's the thing. We saw it, and maybe you'll find something useful with it.
One thing just to add to it is the ideal bit of this is that the longevity tech tree, there's like different layers in which you can be building. There's the layer that we currently have, and that's really mostly maximized for people that are new to the field to get a quick understanding of what the field's about, roughly grok what the different technologies that we need to do are, different long-term goals. And then we list a bunch of actors. If you click on any of the black nodes, for example, it will open up to including listing a lot of the kind of like actors, labs, companies, and so forth that are working on this stuff. And I think that's pretty useful because you can just like easily self-select into which bucket you want to go and work on. But you can imagine a similar tech tree, like just focusing on one topic, just focusing in on fire protection toxicity and like spinning out a tech tree that is mostly just trying to figure out the science of that stuff. And so you can basically, you can build these tech trees within the tech tree, and there's an infrastructure for doing that. And we had that in the past iteration. I think people got really excited about, I think it was ECM, right? Yeah, I think someone like a small subgroup built out like the ECM part of the tech tree, big time, and we still had the other tech tree. And so you can like have different groups forming that specialize on building out a specific part. Likewise, or to the contrary, you can also zoom out. For example, the longevity tech tree is only a part of kind of the Foresight tech tree forest. We're building out another one on AI and security right now. We have old ones still for nanotech and for neurotech and so forth. And so we're trying to revamp all of them such that eventually you can kind of like zoom into the nitty gritty parts of one node, but you can also zoom out and figure out how the different tech trees actually interrelate, because much of the thing that will, many of the nodes that will actually be on the AI tech tree will have implications for the longevity tech tree. Many of the things on the longevity tech tree might have further implications also for parts of the neurotech tree, for like brain aging or so forth. And so ideally you can choose your level of depth, and like ideally they're quite interoperable. So yeah, anyway, that's just my 2 cents on it. Okay, we have David Brown raise the hand.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious in your construction of this tree if you ever came across any scenarios where you found technologies that would obviate one of the requirements. So I'll just make something up that doesn't make any sense. But so cryoprotectant toxicity is a bottleneck that's preventing cryonic organ preservation. Have you ever found cases where there was like some other technology that if you figured that out, it would actually just trim this portion of the tree because it's no longer necessary, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for instance, it's not well represented yet, but like for instance, gene therapy would probably just eliminate the need for chemotherapy for removing cancer damage.
Yeah, it's almost like an ore condition, right?
Yeah. And that's one of the things that you'd like to know, right? Everyone would like to know, hey, do we even need this thing? Or can we just work around it? Can we just bypass that particular piece? Yeah, for sure. There's definitely pieces like that. If we got lab-grown blood to work, we wouldn't need to worry about parabiosis or plasma transfers or anything like that, right? So there's pieces on here that are like that.
Cool. Okay.
Stephen?
Yeah, Steve, go for it.
Yeah, very interesting. One of the things I've noticed is that there is a tendency for the goal of radical life extension to consider squaring the curve to be fundamentally irrelevant.
Mm,
I've run across this kind of thought process that the breakthrough for radical life extension will involve fundamental aspects of aging that have nothing to do with diseases of civilization and
mm.
such. And I don't buy into that thought, but I'm curious about whether or not there is a way that squaring the curve can be a proof of concept for radical life extension, in the sense that the mechanisms for radical life extension should be applicable to the diseases of civilization. And that if they aren't, that maybe we're missing something in that grand vision. So I was curious as to whether or not
Yeah,
thought about that, of including that kind of approach to things, like considering, let's say, redox mechanisms as a basis for heart disease and Alzheimer's disease, where it's not necessarily part of or many people might not think it's part of
yeah. So I get what you're saying, and I agree. So this has different pieces. So there's like damage removal, whole body replacement, cybernetic body replacement. These are a bit more of the out there, like we're gonna go from like here all the way to a million in one shot. The conservative portions, which is like reducing the rate of damage accumulation, regeneration of repair pathways, they're also represented here. And so I'm on both sides of that spectrum. I believe in the conservative parts of it. I also believe in the liberal parts of it. And I think that we should also, heat shock response is on here. Heat shock response is not going to get you to living for 1,000 years, but it could induce a lot of regeneration to make you really healthy at age 100. If we could figure out fundamental mechanisms about that, cold shock response, understanding hibernation mechanisms, potentially in humans, microbiome stuff, which is, it's right now, microbiome is pretty exciting for normal medicine. It's really tame for the people who are out in the extremes. So I think that's all very compatible. And I think that it's got a place in terms of, hey, how do we do stuff tomorrow versus how do we do stuff 2 years, 10 years, 20
I
years
have
from now?
a suggestion that
Sure.
I've seen these kinds of issues where so for example, mercury toxicity is less in people with high selenium status. These kinds of things where there's an effect that is almost discovered accidentally by somebody, and that this is largely ignored as I don't know, on a conceptual basis for application to a particular problem. For example, redox stability affects vitamin C influence on collagen maintenance in the vascular system. And so people with heart disease have a pathology in that department. But is vitamin C the competency and recycling mechanism studied as a basis for, let's say, cryopreservation toxicity?
Right. So there could be overlap. My plan for this was not to put in all of healthcare. So there's all the sorts of like standard healthcare stuff that is relevant for curing acute diseases. If it's something that will affect longevity on like a population scale, and I know, or how about this? It's not about the effect, it's about the cause. So if the cause was something that's like a chronic disorder, something that happens innately to you, even if you do everything correctly, then I consider that to be part of longevity. If it's something where if you get a disease and you cure it, if you cured pneumonia, you would extend average lifespan. That's just a fact, right? Because people would be alive that would have been dead. But that's not part of longevity, in my opinion, because you're curing a acute disease rather than something that is just like a chronic buildup of damage or something that would just happens because you're living. You contracted a disease that could have been avoided. You can argue about that, but it's different. I feel like, am I explaining myself?
Yeah, I think I get it, but I
Okay.
don't know if the answer encompasses the extent to which different physiological homeostatic systems play against each other. So if
I would
one
leave.
situation, if you have vitamin C becoming deficient because this is a
Right.
condition that all humans suffer from. And therefore, this is a kind of species weakness on our part that because of political influences against, let's say, Linus Pauling is a perfect example, that the role of vitamin C in many different situations is not researched at all, even though
Mhm.
the limited research that's been done shows that it's critical. So if your vitamin C is high, you don't die of pneumonia. And if your vitamin C is low, you do die of pneumonia. That makes it relevant to the issue of life extension. It's one of those variables that is foundational that must be considered for life extension.
I would leave those details up to the people who are writing their individual sections. So if there's people that are doing research on that stuff and they want to include that lit layer of information, then that's fine. They just put it into the tree. I shouldn't be the one to be the arbiter for that kind of stuff. This is just longevity is the end goal. If if you can find a train of logic there where it ties into your advancement and then ties into one of these sort of overarching goals that then ties into radical life extension, then that's fair game. I don't think that there's any reason that should not be included. Micah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think what Steven's mentioning is harking to where I'm also in the same boat where I think you can answer this and that you don't want this to be just a map of all of healthcare. You're
It's
trying
gonna be too
to,
much. Yeah.
yeah, you're trying to constrain it. But on the flip side, we don't know exactly what is going to lead to radical life extension because we have not solved it yet. It could be we find radical life extension by accident when someone goes and solves some rare orphan disease that no one even thought was going to be a longevity therapy. And they're like, oh, oops, we just cured aging. Like that's possible. And so I totally appreciate your position, Aaron, where you don't want this tech tree to be just like something that you have to zoom out for 15 minutes in order to see the whole thing. And at the same time, like it's not clear how we can make sure we're including the things that could lead to life extension. I think your answer was pretty good overall, which is let the experts decide and just put whatever they want in there and try to constrain it as long as they can show you a path. Even if it's an out there path, it's okay as long as there's a path.
And from the goal of the amount of support that we have at this stage, the goal is not to try to capture all information at this point. We're not even close to even having that goal on our radar. The goal is to just find a couple things to start with that were connections that people hadn't noticed before. So
Gotcha.
it's not like we have to get all of it or else this thing is a failure. It's, hey, let's try to get something that makes somebody go, holy crap, like I didn't know that those things were related. And if it just leads to a couple more advancements, then it's already a success. And I get where you're coming from and what if we miss like a thing, but there's just so much out there. I guess it's the difference of looking at it from the perspective of successes versus the perspective of lack of failures. There's two different ends of the spectrum that you can be observing.
So you're saying you're not trying to reinvent Wikipedia in a graph form.
It's just graphical Wikipedia, but I don't want to have everything in Wikipedia in this system.
And we do link out to some longevity wiki things and so forth. And I guess the idea is also, Micah, that like if someone wants to do a different tech tree, they should just be able to fork this one and then build out their own kind of like theory of revolutionary radical life extension and then overlay it onto this map and be like, you're all wrong. Look at the fork version that I built. That should be fine. We also had Kevin asking a question. Do you want to unmute?
Sure. I think I did. Yeah. Okay, good. So 10 years ago, Mikhail Batten was working with a few others. They had incredibly complicated, multi-layered type of thing. And there's been other types of maps which are longevity oriented. Recently, Longevity Biotech Fellowship came up with one about just proposed solutions and intervention areas. It seems that this is a system, Aaron, obviously. It's a system. And if we can identify the number of entities, the relationship between the entities, that have those other maps been incorporated into this?
Yeah, I've seen them all. I've seen all of them and more. I've also looked at pretty much like the diagrams that have been come up with, John Ferber's famous diagram. You don't want it to turn into something overly complicated. At the same time, this is a complicated field. I'm sorry. That's like one of the things. There's at some point, it is going to get complicated if you're trying to find the truth of all this. And that's just the way it is.
I agree completely. So what I would like to just urge everyone to potentially consider is like, this is like a multi-dimensional game of chess, right? Different layers and levels of organization. And that one level of smaller things come together to form larger things, which come together to form larger things.
Yeah.
So what we're looking at is actually multiple layers, and maybe it's good to abstract some of those things to one layer and then differentiate between them on another axis. And then we should be able to connect.
And we can talk about that. And that's very interesting. The bottleneck now for making this tech tree function is the information coming from in the trenches, the people that are actually working on this stuff. We can try to come up with more elaborate or elegant ways of presenting the information at this point. It's not going to do much. At this point, it's about, will people get on board with putting in correct, accurate information about what it is that they're doing and what they need in order to, what steps they need to take in order to get to what they're saying their end goal is, right? What does Michael Levin actually need to do in order to get morphogen? Well, bioelectricity, I don't like that term, but bioelectricity to work for regeneration in humans. Like, what things need to happen in order for that to occur? When we talk about all these different concepts and the pie in the sky view, which I'm just all about, man, that'd be super cool. And we need this first. Oh, but then before we get that, we need to do this.
Keep stepping back and back until finally you realize that people aren't even talking about data, but the same units and the same universe.
Yeah. So the bottleneck now is to get people to put in what is like the accurate truth of what it is that they're working on. And so I think this system as it is about as developed as it can be usefully. Now it's out our hands a little bit. Micah.
For me, it's a systems biology problem where you have kinetics of reactions, where you have two. So if we can describe, as long as the entities get labeled, and as long as a relationship between that entity and the other entities can be defined with different attributes, then you can actually start running simulation. But it's like a systems biology problem. This reminds me of a systems biology software. And it's the same kind of a problem. So how do we get more data, relevant data that can actually connect it to the system? And I think that's always the biggest problem. So you go to the low-hanging fruit and you find the people who are able to actually share their data. And I think that would be like 1 out of 1,000,000. So it's pretty difficult to see how we could get much further than what you've done. But I think that really it's important, the critical work to be done. Once you've compiled all this information, we just need to identify groups and clusters, like you said. There's going to be some clusters that will be oriented toward bioelectricity. But that's the intent, that you're looking at all of this data, you're looking at lens, bioelectricity. But yeah, so anyway, incorporate as much as we can, create something that lowers the barrier of engagement and lowers the barrier for sharing.
And I think a big part of my personal goals, sorry, no water here, was allowing people to see what the specific problem for any particular field is, the same way that algae biodiesel had a very specific problem. A lot of these fields have one thing where if they could just figure out that one thing, it'd move on forward. Bioprinting of organs, they need to fix the capillary problem. And you should know that if you're interested in that field, you could just know that it takes 2 seconds to identify that, right?
Bottleneck. Actually, you're right. It's the bottlenecks, identifying the bottlenecks. Once you describe the landscape and you want to try to find out where are the bottlenecks within that landscape so that everybody can, because that's where the money is.
Yeah.
But you can solve that problem. That's where you're going to be the bigger and be a winner.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
Anyway, I just wanted to bring up the point of multiple maps have already been created. I hope knowledge has been incorporated into this.
Yeah.
How do we take this to the next level and so have people who are engaged and interested could easily contribute to it? I think that's really, because you're just one guy and there isn't this single brain on the planet that can actually do this job at all.
Yeah.
It's going to take all of us.
Yeah.
What we were doing.
Nita had her hand up, but then she.
Yeah, Nita, you have it up again.
Sure. Yeah, I think I agree with a lot of what's been said by Micah and Kevin and Stephen, especially the point that this is a bit of a systems biology problem in nature. And it's really cool that Aaron's presenting today, because this is something that I've been delving into mostly from a complex chronic condition standpoint. So I definitely think there's a ton of overlap, because obviously there's a lot of overlap between chronic conditions and aging and how much one body contributes to the other. But yeah, I do think that it would be really cool to potentially organize knowledge by levels and then also see the crosstalk between levels, whether we're looking at the cellular level, the organismal level, and also like the crosstalk between these different systems. I also think it's really interesting that you have a lot of crosstalk between the host tissues and then what comprises the holobionts in terms of the viruses and fungi, bacteria, archaea that are making up the system, because there's just, I think, most of the pathology, including aging, I think will be traced to a breakdown in communication. So I think elucidating those communication networks between the gene regulatory pathways, looking at multi-omics interactions, and then also being able to include some of the feedback loops. Because like sometimes with these more reductionist maps, you might miss some of those more intricate communications between systems. But yeah, this is a really exciting thing to be a part of. And I think there's multiple ways you can map this. For example, right now, it looks like a linear food chain, but you can actually turn it into a food network type of diagram. You're seeing more of the interconnectedness of different elements.
Yep. Yeah, we did it like this simply to organize it for progress, like from a progress standpoint. Something like Wikipedia doesn't have a goal, right? It's just here's all this knowledge and here's how it's connected. So if you didn't have an end goal and you just wanted to know how things were related to each other, we could remove. Technically, you could. The goal here is to try to see what folds into radical life extension. But if you didn't have that as an end goal, you could turn this into a non-directional map of just here's all the things, here's how they're connected to each other. Micah and then Stephen.
Yeah, you mentioned that some of the people you talk to are worried that someone's going to steal their idea, and I've run into this a lot. The thing that I wish people understood is that there are way more ideas than there are people working on ideas, and you do not need to worry about your idea being taken because there will be another one right behind it. I wonder if we can use this, try to show that by somehow highlighting, see all these great ideas that no one's working on right now. In your example with the algae thing, if you had that map for how do we get to algae biobatteries or whatever, or algae oil, whatever it was, and you say, hey, see this right here? No one's working on that. Clearly, there's not a shortage of ideas. And if we could have a dozen of those in here, maybe that would help encourage people to realize that, yes, your idea may be cool and good. But if someone wants an idea, they don't have to compete with you for it. They can go work on something else. Here's a dozen things some new entrant can work on without having to compete with you. You're safe. Please share.
Yeah, it's hard because it is difficult. First of all, the idea part of it is very easy. It's easy to come up with ideas. The hard part is actually the work afterwards. That's like way more difficult than just coming up with some brilliant idea. But the lengths that people will go to undercut each other for money, for the sake of money, and the chaos that exists in science and industry and other fields like that, I can see why they're scared, especially if they haven't thought about it that much. Like they're just like, I just don't want to deal with that. They see it as an existential threat to their career and life. And I get where they're coming from, but it is a bottleneck of, hey, nobody knows what you actually need to do to make this work. So that is hard. I feel like it's also going to be difficult for people to get funding when they can't describe what they're doing accurately.
And I guess like an additional benefit of this is being listed on this tree also allows others that have had similar ideas or were looking into funding similar concepts to just know where you are. I think the big kind of even incentive for other people to contribute and to share their work on this bit is that if enough people use it and make connections to them about the stuff, they're just much easier traceable. Like the biggest problem is that when new people are trying to enter into the longevity field, they're just like, where the hell do I start? Okay, there are now finally a few roadmaps from Amaranth Foundation and LBF. They're like actually digestible, but it's still very difficult. From then you need to go to Carl Flager's agingbiotech.info page. And I think maybe I'll just share this for a bit. The nice thing about this is that it actually like links not only does it explain a different node, but it also links to companies on there and to different labs on there and possible funder sources on there. If you want to compare them, you could even say, please compare Drift Bio and Altus labs on reprogramming, and it compares it to companies almost from an investment standpoint, if you wanted to do that, like using information from the internet and from the tree. And so like meta incentives were even being listed on there with the ideas that you can be easier found and collaborated with. And then of course the attribution part I think is difficult to some extent, but it's not impossible that you can create like alternative mechanisms to even incentivize that. So for example, here, like the final goal has a few bits, like we have this longevity hypothesis prize together with VitaDAO and a few other longevity organizations where we paid people $20K to submit a one-pager about a new hypothesis within longevity that is still undervalued. And so ideally we can chain these prizes into the tree and actually incentivize people to contribute new ideas of like where this tree is wrong or what's an undervalued kind of like hypothesis for making progress on this stuff. Then there's like various different research portfolios that you can apply to. We even started doing some prediction markets on various aspects of the tree that are linked from it. And so we're trying to like make it a little bit more like incentivized for folks to actually contribute their ideas and to be found and to be collaborating with others. And I think, yeah, I guess for people in the field, sometimes you don't even know that there's someone else out there working on the challenge that is stopping you from making progress on your node. And so hopefully there's that extra incentive for being on there, just by virtue of the fact of knowing where you're standing within a larger ecosystem that has other companies and funders and founders that are potentially like interested in solving similar challenges to you that might be upstream or downstream of you. So hopefully it's also a coordination network or shilling point for people in the field. Yeah. Okay, that was me. I don't know who had the next hand up. Was it Steve?
It's Steven.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before I go on to talking more about Kevin's idea of levels, I'd like to mention that the whole idea of looking at companies introduces the economic competitiveness model and imposes the win-lose strategy of patent law and how things are enforced on that level. And I think that is such a small part of it and is subject to so much corruption and fear-based decision-making. That's, I think, a bad place to focus. But I'd like to talk about Kevin's level ideas, because the advantage of this software and database is the ability to potentially look at just a subset of what's going on in the research fields related to aging. And if one can pull up only 2 different levels, one can then ask the question, instead of being buried in data. John's aging chart takes an entire wall in 10-point type to show it, that you can then focus in on just 2 levels and how they might synergize with each other. Is there something in one level that can feed into the other, or vice versa? This simplifies the process of analysis to a scale that can be met by a human mind. So I think that's a supreme value in this particular system and approach. The second thing is an example. So billions of dollars have been spent on Alzheimer's research. And everybody went for amyloid and tau protein and identifying all these different mechanisms. But the thing that wasn't obvious about it was mercury. And it turns out that all the enzymes that are inhibited in Alzheimer's disease are mercury sensitive, and the enzymes that aren't inhibited aren't mercury sensitive. And there was no way to see that in looking at the amyloid level or the tau hyperphosphorylation level. There was no way to see that. It was dental scientists that were looking at mercury toxicity that realized what that was. And it literally came out of left field, out by the fence.
Yep.
And so anything that we can do to make such possible level comparisons can lead to unexpected benefits that might help either one of the levels or trash both of the levels.
Right. Yeah, I can't promise
Amen.
to capture all the X factor breakthroughs like that, but if a couple of them happen because of like looking at information in a different way like this, then I think that the whole thing would be worth it. Yeah. I think
Yeah, Nita and Micah, I don't know if your hands are still relevant. If so, then it's Nita followed by Micah.
I just had a question about potentially adding something about the different methods that people are using in these trees. I know that's partially included in one of the colored boxes, but if we had different boxes for this is specific type of computational analysis that's specific to multiple groups, or there's a specific type of modeling that might be relevant to different groups, and having ways to collaborate based on methodology potentially and access to data sets in that regard.
Yeah, so there's like a tagging system that's also here. So like the original idea was to put little badges on it. It might get cluttered if there's too many objects, but that kind of thing is like metadata where it's this uses this method, and that would be inside of these boxes, various boxes. What you could do is you could filter for, I want to see everything that uses JavaScript, blah, blah, blah. I want to use everything I want to filter for everything that uses mass spec or something like that, right? Because let's say that your expertise is mass spec or like LC mass spec or something like that. And you're like, I want to see which pieces I would actually be able to contribute to here. And you could just filter for that. And then it would highlight everything that had that particular tag on it. And then you immediately know, oh, okay, let me look at this field rather than that other field. So that's definitely something that can be done very easily. Yeah.
I guess one could even do it by literally just like mentioning on the node.
Yeah.
Something like, okay, like almost like a new category, methodologies used. And then what you can do is you can ask the chatbot just to highlight all the different nodes on this tree that have that methodology in it. And then you get like a cluster of them basically spread out. So I guess you can search that way. Okay,
Right.
Micah.
Yeah, on that note, it's make you realize that I very frequently get asked by people in software industry. They ask, I'd like to contribute to aging, but I don't know how. And so being able to give them a map like this and just say, click the filter by software expertise required button. And it would just show them all the places where they could go do some open source programming or do some software development or whatever and contribute without having to go learn biology. Like they want to contribute, they're out there, they just don't know how. And so that would be really cool. The comment I was actually going to make though was, again, coming back to the, how do we get people to actually contribute to this map, which I really would like to see more of. Have you guys considered allowing people to have private nodes? And this would annoy me greatly because I hate private information, but I would rather a person who is working in this field put down a node that's just blank, but it shows the connections. And the reason for this is that we can then see more and more of what stuff, how much things unlock. So if we see that cryoprotectant toxicity unlocks cryonic organ preservation, but maybe there's someone out there working on somewhere else, on something else, and they don't want to share it because they think their idea is brilliant and they don't want to tell anybody. But they could say, my thing depends on solving cryoprotectant toxicity as well.
Mm-hmm.
And if my thing is solved, it will lead to curing cancer. And so they could create the links even without admitting what it is that they're doing. Again, I'm not a fan of this because I'm a huge fan of open information, but this would at least get more connections and more nodes on the graph and potentially get people involved. And maybe over time, they would then open up a little bit and say, you know what, this graph is pretty cool. It's got all these things on it. I'd like to actually reveal my super secret technology. Has any thought been put to that sort of thing, or do you think that wouldn't work for some reason?
The only way I would be open to something like that is if George Church came in and he's all, oh, we'll put in our thing, but make it private, but also we'll try to get more support for this thing. And I'd be like, maybe, I guess that, okay, sure. But it just doesn't seem, it would have to be somebody like really intent on doing it that way. Then we'd consider it.
Yeah, I guess one thing that is still under development, there's like a bunch of kind of extensions that you can have for this. So one of them is like a kind of identity system where people can basically like almost contribute or leave notes on the nodes and basically say, hey, I'm working on something here, contact me. That's still being built out, but basically actually using it as a shedding burns for coordination more. Yeah, and basically anyone who has an account can edit that node and put their tag in and then be contacted by others that are like also interested in like collaborating on the same stuff. There's also a system called Drip where you can basically pay people based on contributions that they have made to the tree. So there's like an automatic payment system that is currently being built on top of it. That means you can pay them like nominally. And then there's this person that I met who's currently building. So you know how there's Substack where you subscribe to like various different articles? He's building something similar, but from an angel and VC perspective. So basically, you can subscribe to a different node. So let's say I'm a VC really just focused on Sanalytics. You can then subscribe to the Sanalytics node whenever something here gets updated. You get like a ping, like whenever there's a new lab on there or company added or something, you get a ping, and you can basically pay people to source information about a node through that system that he's building, almost like a subscription to a Substack, but he's subscribing to a list. And so you're actually incentivizing and paying people to go out there, collect information about it, de-risk the space, analyze it, and then you can incentivize for doing that for various parts of the different nodes. So you can really have these funding streams leading into these aspects more. Yeah, but we're very early stages here. I know that we're almost at time. I just want to say that if you're interested in contributing to a node, for example, if you, people in this Zoom room, and then afterwards people looking at this on YouTube afterwards, if you guys are interested in contributing to any of the nodes, then maybe you're working in one of the fields, maybe you're trying to build one of these aspects out more, whatever it might be, then please do contact us. I guess what's the easiest? My Twitter DM, maybe Alison Dman on Twitter, or Alison@foresight.org. And then Aaron, do you want to say your contact info? I'm not sure if you want to say it, but
sure.
Otherwise you can contact me and I can forward it to you.
Contact Alison. I'll put my email in the chat here. That's the one that check more often. I have a company now, so I have a company email as well, but this one is my free company email.
And then last but not least, maybe if you guys are trying to find this tree afterwards, you can go on the foresight.org website. Once you're on the Foresight website, you can click your way through to the Biotech node, so to the Biotech page, scroll down on Foresight's Biotech page to the bottom, and then you have the tree linked from our main website. So if you're trying to find it, looking at this afterwards, that's the easiest way to find the tree. Okay, so thanks everyone. We're at,
Is that the read one or the one that requires login?
That's the read-only version. We're not allowing everyone to edit it yet, but if you guys want to edit it, you have to contact us. Yeah, so it should be open. You should be able to open it from any browser. Okay, thank you so much, Aaron.
Bye.
Sorry, Kevin.
Take care.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Aaron. That was fantastic.